Bonjour, distingués.
Good morning, distinguished delegates, dear participants. We are about to resume our work. Please, may I invite you to take your seats.
To be ready for the starting. Prenez place, s'il vous plaît.
Please take your seats.
Distingués délégués, donc
Distinguished delegates, we are about to begin. As announced yesterday, we shall begin this morning with the consideration of conference room papers, which have already been published online. And once we have completed their consideration, we will resume our agenda with the item on the amendments proposals for the appendices of the Convention.
et avant d'en
But before we move on to the consideration of the CRPs, as per our usual practice, we will hear the reports from the various working groups and committees. I invite the chair of the Credentials Committee to please report to us. You have the floor.
Today, as there have been no more official credential submissions, as of yesterday, the committee has validated a total of 60 credentials. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank you. Now I move on to the Budget Working Group, and I invite the chair of the Budget Working Group to please report on progress made within the working group. You have the floor.
Times yesterday and have made excellent progress finalizing our budget for the next intersessional period. Further discussion also took place on the draft resolution text yesterday, focused around the issue of how to address arrears. Discussion will continue this afternoon, either at 12:45 or after discussion on resource mobilization have concluded, if this returns to the working group. At the next session, we hope to finalize our deliberations on the budget for this triennium and continue our discussion on arrears. With this in mind, we would welcome broader participation from across the regions to support this exchange and help us identify if there are other approaches we could be taking to support all parties to make their annual contributions in a timely manner. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
Thank you. And I also thank all of the members of the working group on budget for the progress made. Now, May I invite the Aquatic Species Working Group to report on progress made. The chair of the Aquatic Species Working Group has the floor. The COP appointed councillor has the floor.
Time and also late into the evening. We had very productive discussions, but they will need to continue today to make progress on the many items on the aquatic agenda. We discussed 6 items and CRPs have been finalised for the following 5. 25.2.1 marine pollution, 25.2.2 underwater noise, 25.2.3 deep sea mining, 25.3.1 priorities for area-based conservation of marine migratory species, and 25.3.2 vessel strikes. The CRPs for these documents are now available online. We also spent a lot of time discussing 25.1.1 bycatch. Our discussions on that work are nearly concluded, and I would be hopeful that by end of the lunchtime session today that would be finished and the CRP would be available online. The other items that we need to discuss today are 25.3.3 conserving seamount ecosystems, 25.4.1 conservation priorities for cetaceans, 25.6.1 freshwater fish, and 25.6.2 the European eel. And we are looking forward to fruitful conversations and concluding discussions on these documents by the close of play today. Thanks very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Chair. And I thank all of the members of the Working Group on Aquatic Species for the progress made. Now, may I invite the Avian Species Working Group Chair to read their report. Chair of the Avian Species Working Group, you have the floor.
Progress, and wish to thank the Secretariat for their usual high-quality support and participants for their convivial and constructive engagement. The following CRPs have been endorsed by the CAO and sent to the COP. 26.1, the prevention of illegal killing, taking and trade of migratory species. 26.5, action plan for migratory land birds in the African-Eurasian region. And 26.6, conservation of African Eurasian vultures. The following CRPs that are posted are ready and will be discussed in this morning's session. 26.2, preventing poisoning of migratory birds. 26.4.1, action plans for birds. And 26.8, internationally important raptor areas. The following CRPs are also available on the website for review and will be discussed in the CAO session this afternoon. 26.3.2, seabirds and marine flyways. 26.7, Saker Falcon Global Action Plan. And during today's lunchtime slot, the Avian Working Group will be revisiting the document on 26.3.1 flyways to confirm the text that was agreed last night by the parties after consultations with their delegations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank Zambia for this presentation on on progress made within the Avian Species Working Group. I now invite the Working Group on Terrestrial Species to report on progress or to convey any information they may wish to share.
Le groupe de travail sur
The Working Group on Terrestrial Species. Are you ready to report to the Committee of the Whole, or shall I move on to the cross-cutting Working Group? Therefore, I invite the chair of the cross-cutting working group to take the floor.
Yesterday during the lunchtime session to discuss agenda item 30.1, guidelines for preparing and assessing proposals for the amendment of CMS appendices. The discussion, which was very cordial, revolved around the newly proposed paragraph 6b of the draft resolution and new additions to paragraph 4.5 in the explanatory notes of the resolution. The working group agreed to formalise the discussion after agreement in document 14.3 on resource mobilisation, and I thank the Secretariat for first-rate support.
Thank you, Chair. The cross-cutting working group met yesterday evening to discuss two documents. I'll report on the first of those, and then we can hand to the Chair of the second document. With respect to document 28.5, Rev 1 on wildlife health, we resolved one of the two outstanding pieces of bracketed text, and I'm very grateful to the parties for finding compromise text which helped to capture the intent. The second bracketed text related to resourcing, which is an issue which is also relevant to several other agenda items. So we agreed to park that bracketed text until after discussion on document 14.3 on resource mobilisation. Following that discussion, we are hopeful of revisiting 28.5 on wildlife health at lunchtime. I'm very grateful to the Secretariat and all members of the working group for their support and engagement. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank you very much for the information on the working group on cross-cutting issues. I now give the floor to New Zealand.
Discuss document 15 on the Samarkand Strategic Plan for Migratory Species. We had a very constructive meeting and there was a very cooperative spirit in the room and we made good progress. There is now a CRP available online. There are 4 paragraphs with square brackets on the indicators and actions under target 4.3 in the CRP. And the outcome on these paragraphs is contingent on the outcome on agenda item 14.3, resource mobilisation, which I understand will be discussed in the Committee of the Whole today. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So, we have covered all the groups apart from the terrestrial working group. While we await that, we will start with today's agenda.
Donc, j'invite le comité.
I call on the committee to start our work on looking at today's documents on our agenda, and we will start with CRP 14.3, which is on resource mobilization, and the floor is open. Brazil, you have the floor.
The chairs of the many working groups. This discussion on item 14.3 is still of great importance, and it is also affecting the discussion in other items that we think that may be solved within the discussion of 14.3. We think that the item deserves further discussions, and we would be very glad and hope that these discussions can be settled during the discussions of the working group at lunch today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Brazil, do we have any further requests for the floor? Or any comments on the proposal we have just heard from Brazil? I see no request for the floor. So I take it that you agree with Brazil's proposal. So the discussions on this agenda item will continue within the working group. If that can help, we certainly are in favor of following that way forward. And so I suggest we go to the next item. CRP 28.14 on multiple systems of knowledge. And the floor is open.
Je vois pas de demande de...
I do not see any request for the floor. Brazil, you have the floor.
To check with the Secretariat if the proposal of the EU to delete according to national circumstances is still on the paper. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Brazil. The Secretariat, you have the floor.
To respond, but we were informed by them that this text is acceptable for them. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. European Union, can you confirm that?
Confirm. Merci beaucoup, l'Union.
Thank you very much, European Union. So I consider that the committee recommends that the CRP be submitted for adoption to the COP plenary. I do not see any objections. It is so decided, and we'll move to the next item, which is the CRP 26.2, preventing poisoning of migratory birds. The floor is open.
Je vois pas d'inter...
I do not see any request for the floor. Does that mean that there is agreement to submit the document for final adoption at the COP? I see no reactions, no divergent opinions. So the committee recommends that this document be submitted to the COP for final adoption. It is so decided, and I now invite you to consider CRP 26.4.1, Action Plans for Birds. The floor is open.
Je vois pas de demande de...
I do not see any request for the floor. So we will continue in the same manner. The committee recommends the submission of this document as it stands to the COP for final adoption. No comments. So it is so decided. And I now invite you to consider the next item, which is CRP 26.8, internationally important raptor areas. The floor is open.
Je vois pas de...
I do not see any request for the floor or comments. Does that say that the meeting is in agreement to transfer this document to the COP for adoption? I see no objections or comments, so it is so decided. The document will be sent to the COP for adoption. Now we will move on to CRP 27.1, the joint CITES CMS African Carnivores Initiative. The floor is open.
L'USN, à vous la parole.
IUCN, you have the floor.
From its inception, and IUCN and CMS Secretariat signed the MOU in February 2024 at CMS COP15 to recognize the role that the IUCN Save Our Program SOS can play in implementing the ACI's priorities, and to facilitate collaboration to support the implementation of the ACIs through a re-granting mechanism developed and managed by IUCN. Through the SOS granting mechanism, grant-making mechanism, we are ready to channel directly funds to conservation actors across the range of ACI species for the implementation of the priorities defined by the ACI program of work, including the promotion of coexistence, habitat protection and restoration, disease management. IUCN, with funding from the European Union, has enabled action on the ground for ACI species and has contributed towards developing conservation strategies for many of these species. But this funding is ending. In June last year, IUCN held a roundtable donor meeting to raise funds for ACI species. A private foundation made a pledge towards a significant financial contribution to this funding, but they require that one-to-one matching fund contributions are secured in the coming months. Without other donor commitments, this funding opportunity will be lost. This represents a significant opportunity to accelerate the ACI's implementation. We are actively looking for the matching fund and call on donors to support us. IUCN stands ready to work with all interested donors to design targeted funding windows that deliver impacts at the scale for ACI species. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
Thank you very much, IUCN. Uganda.
Uganda has been a very active member in supporting the activities of ACI. Chair, in 2016 and 2023, Uganda was privileged to have hosted the joint CITES CMS African Carnivore Initiative meetings, and several threats were identified. And since then, Uganda has been at the forefront of coordinating implementation of various initiatives. And Uganda Chair developed recently a national large carnivore conservation strategy, 2023-2033. And we therefore invite parties to partner with us to continue supporting this initiative. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Uganda. CITES.
Parties to CITES adopted decisions on the African Carnivore Initiative, African Lion, Cheetah and Leopard at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. These decisions include support to the range states to review the ACI program of work, while species-specific decisions will support the implementation of specific priority actions identified at the second meeting of the range states. The CITES Secretariat will continue to collaborate with the range states as well as the CMS Secretariat to support the implementation of the revised program of work based on its mandate. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, CITES. I see there are further requests for the floor, but I would like to remind everyone that we are looking at the CRP, so your interventions should be focused on the content of the CRP. Are you in agreement, or do you have any amendments to the CRP? I'm just recalling this because now we are not in a space for now where we can share our national contexts and actions, because now we need to be focused on the document that is under discussion. Kenya, would you like to speak about the content of the document?
Kenya is in support of whatever has been discussed in the draft decision contained in the annex of this document, and in effect, the deletions of the decisions hereby also stated. And Kenya urges parties and encourages non-parties, including Namibia and Botswana, that are range states to one or more of the 4 species covered by the SCI to implement relevant CITES resolutions and decisions through the SCI. The adoption of Proposal 3021 to list cheetah population of Zimbabwe on CMS Appendix 1 and 2 will strengthen the SCI. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Kenya. So, on the basis of the discussions we have heard, I consider that the committee recommends that we submit the document as it stands for final adoption to the COP. I do not see any objections. It is so decided, and now we will move to the next item, which is CRP 27.4 on Jaguar. The floor is open, so please can we keep the interventions on either supporting or suggesting an amendment with a text proposal. We really need to use our time as effectively as possible. We have a lot before us, and the COP is coming nearer to the end. Thank you. Brazil.
If this text is the same that was present yesterday, and if it's not, what was the change made from yesterday to today? Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Text that was presented yesterday.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Secretariat. Is that okay? I see 3 requests for the floor. So please be brief. And if you have comments or not, please everyone try and be brief with the interventions. UNEP. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond to the question that was asked yesterday on the subject of the Jaguar that was directed at UNEP. We welcome the document and the regional action plan for the conservation of the Jaguar, and we are grateful to the range states and the Secretariat and all the stakeholders who have contributed to the decision to ensure that the Jaguar is on our agenda. UNEP, in relation to the question, supports the establishment of an intergovernmental platform for the conservation of the Jaguar, which is driven by the member states, and we are willing to assist in its establishment through our regional office for Latin America and the Caribbean, if that suits the range states. And the question yesterday the answer to that is that whilst we currently don't have the resources available to finance the setting up of the platform, but we are willing to support and to support the efforts of the intersessional working group. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, UNEP. CITES.
Conservation of and trade in jaguars, as well as decisions focused on actions directed to jaguar range states to actively implement the regional action plan for jaguar conservation agreed by range states in 2025. The Secretariat recognizes the leadership of jaguar range states in agreeing this important regional framework. The CITES Standing Committee established an intersessional working group co-chaired by Brazil and Mexico and comprising jaguar range states, relevant parties, partner convention secretariats, UNDP and UNEP, to support the process to operationalize the intergovernmental platform for jaguar conservation. This includes providing input on the terms of reference and modalities of the platform and identifying and evaluating potential sources of financing as indicated by UNEP as well. The CITES Secretariat will continue to support the range states and will, in this regard, identify activities that can be undertaken jointly with the Convention on Migratory Species to be included in the CMS CITES Joint Programme of Work for consideration by the CITES Standing Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, la CITES.
Thank you very much, CITES. Pantera, you have the floor.
Our 2030 Roadmap Coordination Committee. We thank Brazil for its leadership with the government of Mexico to advance a range-wide approach to jaguar conservation and commend all 18 jaguar range states for their work since COP15 to reach a landmark agreement on the new regional action plan. The plan integrates the objectives of the Jaguar 2030 Roadmap and other initiatives and builds on the Jaguar 2030 New York Statement and range states' national plans to secure priority jaguar landscapes throughout the species range with renewed ambition for 2050. Just this week, at the 13th Ibero-American Conference of Ministers of Environment and Climate, the ministers adopted a declaration that explicitly calls for strengthening the jaguar network and other regional coordination initiatives. With this momentum behind us, we note the resolution's call to move quickly to implement priority actions under the CMS mandate. Even the mighty jaguar's resilience is threatened by the ongoing destruction and fragmentation of its habitats and illegal killing. The partners in the Jaguar 2030 Committee stand ready to support range states, as stated in the resolution, to monitor and preserve connectivity and the future of this magnificent species. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
Thank you, Pantera. That was the last speaker on my list. So I consider that the committee recommends that the document be submitted to the COP. I see no objections. It is so decided, and we will now move to the last CRP for this morning, which is CRP 28.7, light pollution, and the floor is open. Brazil. Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor.
Replace the verb implores to also encourages. Just this minor suggestion. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you, Brazil. Do we have any other requests for the floor? I see no further requests for the floor. I request the agreement of the meeting to take into account the suggestion from Brazil.
L'Union européenne.
European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, European Union. Brazil, would you mind rereading your proposed amendment?
strive to also encourage us. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Brazil. European Union.
About this verb.
What do we think about this change of verb from deplore to also?
Your mic, your...
May I ask for a second just to
Okay.
consult our colleagues?
Okay. La République dominicaine.
Dominican Republic. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to everyone. We wanted a mention to be made of the impact of lighting and light pollution on marine turtles and their nesting sites on beaches. We are working on regulations aimed to achieve that, and we think that were it to be possible, in paragraph 11, where it says invites the Scientific Council to monitor new evidence of the impacts of light pollution and approaches to mitigation, that there we could add a mention of this specific subject relating to marine turtles. Our apologies for not having made this suggestion earlier. But if there is an opportunity to include this correction, we would be grateful for the support of countries who face similar challenges. Thank you very much, Dominican Republic. If you have some text available that you can share with us, I would be grateful if you could read it. Not just the idea, but the text.
République dominicaine.
Dominican Republic. Yes, thank you very much, Chair. We will prepare it and send it. So please, there was an agreement that amendments proposed have to be read in the meeting. Is it ready? Or do you need time to prepare it, or is it just going?
Donc, on a...
So while we await the Secretariat, the Dominican Republic, are you ready? Is the text ready? We would like a little time to prepare it, please. Okay, thank you very much. Senegal, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. We support the amendment that was proposed by the Dominican Republic in relation to marine turtles. Thank you. Thank you very much, Senegal. So I would ask the Secretariat, have you a text based on what we heard from the Dominican Republic? We really would like to cover this issue now before we move on with the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I hope I understood well the suggestions through the translation, but the understanding is that impact on marine turtles should be added to paragraph 1, so a possibility could be to add that after approaches to mitigation, so the paragraph would read, invites the Scientific Council to monitor new evidence of the impacts of light pollution and approaches to mitigation, including impacts on marine turtles, and provide advice to the COP as appropriate.
Dominican Republic. Is that what you would have liked? Thank you very much, Secretariat. We are most grateful for your help. Yes, that strikes us as very good if that is inserted as suggested by the Secretariat. Thank you very much, Dominican Republic. Australia, you have the floor.
The points that the Dominican Republic have raised, thank you very much, and the helpful suggestion from the Secretariat. We don't believe it is appropriate just to single out marine turtles in this paragraph here, because light pollution impacts a range of migratory species. The guidelines currently have their own species-specific technical guidance around how to mitigate the impacts of light pollution on marine turtles. When I was listening to the intervention, I thought it was more around the regulations that the Dominican Republic was going to be introducing, and I had potentially thought that we could include in operative paragraph 11 that we invite the Scientific Council to monitor new evidence of the impacts of light pollution and approaches to mitigation, including relevant regulatory approaches, and provide advice to the COP as appropriate. But that is only on the assumption that I thought the intervention was around regulations. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank Australia. The Dominican Republic, what are your views on this? We are very grateful to the delegation of Australia for their support for our idea. Indeed, we felt that paragraph 11 would be the ideal place to address the matters we have raised. We also think that it is appropriate to include this mention in paragraph 11, but we believe that any regulation also requires an impact monitoring approach. So perhaps just referring to regulatory approaches would not be sufficient here. And we do apologize once again for sharing these comments and concerns at a later stage, but we do strongly insist on them. I thank the Dominican Republic. May I come back to the European Union now, if they are ready to comment on Brazil's amendment?
Mr. Chair, in relation to the Brazilian proposal, we are absolutely fine with that. When it comes to the proposal from the Dominican Republic, we would be happy to have a look at concrete text to see if that would be acceptable to us, but at the moment we don't have concrete text at our disposal, so there we are in your hands to guide us on how to practically address that one.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank the European Union. The Dominican Republic. Do you have a text to put forward, and could you tell us where you wish to have it inserted so that we can move on? Thank you, Chair. In light of this situation, we would be in favour of the proposal made by Australia on paragraph 11 and the wording that they proposed. Thank you. Thank you, Dominican Republic. May I come back to the European Union now? The text proposed by Australia. Is it acceptable to you?
Il nous faut quelques minutes, je crois.
We just need a few minutes to read through the text. Is it already available? Thank you to the European Union, says the Chair. Perhaps I could ask Australia to read out their proposal.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Dominican Republic for being so flexible. And I had been having more of a consideration after hearing their second intervention with regards to marine turtles and looking at the paragraph again. And I do have another suggestion which I will highlight as I read out the whole thing that hopefully will address their concerns as well. So operative paragraph 11 would be invites the Scientific Council to monitor new evidence of the impacts of light pollution. And then I thought we could put on migratory species, because then that actually does encapsulate the species that we're interested in looking at the impacts of light pollution. So monitor new evidence of the impacts of light pollution on migratory species and approaches to mitigation, including relevant regulatory approaches, is what I had provided last intervention, and provide advice to the COP as appropriate. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank Australia. Is this acceptable to you, the European Union?
Yes, that seems entirely reasonable to us. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Very well. I thank the European Union, and I take it that the amendment as proposed by the Dominican Republic and reworded by Australia is acceptable to the Committee of the Whole. And as such, the CRP in front of us shall be revised to include this amendment and shall be directly submitted to the COP for final adoption. I see no objections. It is thus decided. I thank you all, distinguished delegates, and I thank the European Union for their flexibility. I urge all parties to show flexibility and a spirit of compromise on the remaining agenda items as well. Now, let us display on the screen the CRPs, which will be for discussion this afternoon. May I ask the technical team to please display on the screen the conference room papers to be examined this afternoon.
Donc, il y a deux pages.
There are 2 pages The first is now displayed on the screen. I invite parties to please take note so as to be ready to discuss them this afternoon. Second page, please. The second page of CRPs for this afternoon is also displayed now, and these documents are also published online. The CRPs we have just seen listed on the screen are also published online for discussion this afternoon. I understand that the Committee of the Whole has taken note of this list of CRPs to be discussed this afternoon. And I invite you to resume the consideration of our agenda with the item on the amendment of the appendices of the Convention. Yesterday we stopped at item 30.2.6. I therefore invite you to begin with the consideration of item 30.2.6 on the proposal for the inclusion of the flesh-footed shearwater on Appendix 2 of the Convention. And I invite the proponents, New Zealand, Australia and France, to introduce this document. New Zealand has the floor.
New Zealand, Australia and France have proposed the inclusion of flesh-footed shearwater on Appendix 2 of the Convention. Flesh-footed shearwater is a seabird species that nests during the austral summer on islands around northern New Zealand, on many islands off Australia, and on St. Paul and Amsterdam Islands, both French territories in the Indian Ocean. Non-breeding and juvenile birds migrate through tropical waters to the Northern Hemisphere. In particular, they migrate to seas off northern Far East Asia and the northern Indian Ocean. The birds return south to colonies in September and October each year. The species is listed as near threatened on the IUCN Red List. Most of the breeding sites are legally protected and free of invasive species, but some still need enhanced protection from introduced mammals. New Zealand, Australia and France, who hold the breeding sites, worked collaboratively to develop this proposal. Additionally, the species forage in or migrate through the seas around other CMS range states and areas of the high seas fished by CMS parties. CMS range states were consulted on the content of this document. New Zealand also discussed the proposal with our Indigenous Māori tribal authorities who have a direct cultural connection with this species and who shared valuable knowledge about the past and continuing ecological and cultural importance of this species, including the role of those returning migrant seabirds in setting seasonal markers in the annual calendar. Fisheries bycatch is recognised as the major threat to flesh-footed shearwater and is the primary cause of population declines. Other significant threats are predation by introduced mammals, ingestion of marine plastics and chemicals, climate change impacts on terrestrial and marine ecosystems, light pollution, and the development of offshore wind farms. Including flesh-footed shearwater on Appendix 2 of the Convention is anticipated to raise awareness of the species and the threats that it faces among CMS parties, CMS non-party range states, relevant international governmental organisations, including regional fisheries management organisations, and other stakeholders. As such, it is hoped that this will lead to increased cooperation and leverage to improve the uptake and effectiveness of seabird bycatch mitigation use in fisheries across the range of the species and encourage the implementation of mitigation in regions where none currently exists. This, combined with improved compliance monitoring and bycatch data collection, will greatly contribute to reduced captures of flesh-footed shearwater and other seabird species in longline fisheries. Additionally, listing on Appendix 2 will elevate the suitability score of flesh-footed shearwater for inclusion on Annex 1 of the Agreement on the Conservation of Albatrosses and Petrels. An Appendix 2 listing on CMS would also promote international cooperation to reduce other threats to flesh-footed shearwater, such as predation by introduced mammals, marine plastics and light pollution, including through research, knowledge sharing and capacity building. The listing proposal is supported.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank New Zealand. I now invite parties to react to this proposal, and please may I ask you to be concise in your statements and express either support or any reservations you may have without going into detailed explanations of the rationale behind it. France.
Est-ce que ça marche? Oui. Je pense que c'est.
I believe we should be able to hear you now. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, the French government is a co-proponent of this proposal to include the flesh-footed shearwater in Appendix 2. We wish to thank the Government of New Zealand for the steering and commitment of this initiative. This species would fully benefit from international cooperation to address the bycatch they face, as well as the destruction of coastal areas, which is a threat to nesters, including in austral summer island areas. Thank you. Brazil.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Brazil. Panama. Thank you, Chair. Panama strongly supports the proposal to include flesh-footed shearwater in Appendix 2 of the Convention. Thank you. Thank you, Panama. Australia.
Proposal to list flesh-footed shearwater under CMS Appendix 2. This species faces multiple escalating threats such as climate change, marine pollution and bycatch in fisheries, all of which jeopardise its survival and the health of marine ecosystems. Listing this species under CMS will strengthen international cooperation to tackle these threats. It will enable parties to work together on reducing bycatch, combating plastic pollution and implementing climate-resilient conservation strategies. These actions are essential for safeguarding seabirds and the ocean ecosystems they sustain. We extend our sincere thanks to the governments of New Zealand and France for their leadership in developing this proposal and for their commitment to marine conservation.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank Australia, the European Union.
I'd like to thank the governments of New Zealand, Australia and France for submitting this proposal and support the inclusion of the flesh-footed shearwater in Appendix 2 of the Convention. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup l'Union européenne.
I thank the European Union. Monaco, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Monaco also wishes to support the inclusion of this species on Appendix 2, and we thank the proponents for this proposal. Thank you. Thank you, Monaco. Samoa.
Forward this proposal. Samoa supports the inclusion of flesh-footed shearwater on Appendix 2, noting clear need for strengthening the international cooperation to address the key threats, particularly fisheries bycatch, plastic pollution, and climate change impacts across its migratory range. We recognize that the species migrates widely across the Pacific, including through tropical waters of the region. We also see relevance through ongoing work in Samoa on reducing marine pollution, strengthening bycatch mitigation, and advancing ecosystem-based management under our ocean strategy and marine spatial planning processes. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup,
Thank you, Samoa. Senegal. Thank you, Chair. Senegal also wishes to support this proposal. Thank you. Thank you very much, Senegal. This brings me to the last speaker on my list. This is the very last speaker, ACAP.
Proposal within the CMS, and that's the interest in the proposal of bringing it to ACAP for its consideration. As highlighted in the proposal, this is a species well known for its seabird bycatch and well known for facing myriad conservation threats at its breeding sites. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank you, ACAP. This was the last speaker on my list. I see that overall in the room there is support for this proposal. I take it therefore that the Committee of the Whole recommends that this proposal be submitted for final adoption to the COP plenary. I see no objections. It is so decided, and the proposal shall be submitted to the COP for final adoption. Now, I invite the committee to move on to the consideration of item 30.2.7, the proposal for the inclusion of the Hudsonian whimbrel on Appendix 1 of the Convention. And I invite the proponents, Brazil and Chile, to introduce this document. You have the floor, Brazil.
To be very brief, this proposal is presented by Brazil and Chile to include Hudsonian whimbrel in Appendix 1. The Hudsonian whimbrel undertakes long-distance migrations between breeding areas in the Arctic and non-breeding areas in South America, including Brazil. But it's recorded along nearly the entire coastline and in the Amazon. Threats include the loss of degradation of its habitat due to unregulated economic activities. Additional threats include disturbances from unregulated recreational activities and vehicle traffic on some beaches, ecological change caused by climate change, exposure to heavy metal contamination, and hunting. At national level, the species was assessed for extinction risk in 2017 and is classified on the official list of Brazilian fauna threatened with extinction as vulnerable. The present proposal recommends the inclusion of Hudsonian whimbrel in Appendix 1, since the family to which this taxon belongs is Colopaceae, is already listed in Appendix 2 of CMS. This species depends on habitats in more than 30 countries, including 11 CMS parties. Therefore, its inclusion in Appendix 1 would strengthen efforts among these countries to work collaboratively to conserve its habitats throughout its annual cycle, promote additional conservation and management measures specifically for this taxon, and improve its conservation status. Thank you very much.
Merci infiniment.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Chile, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. As regards the proposal which has been submitted jointly with Brazil for the inclusion of Numenius hudsonicus in Appendix 1 of the Convention, we wish to highlight that we have a law on hunting and a regulation at national level. As mentioned, this is a long-distance migratory shorebird with 30 range states across America, from the Arctic to South America. It is a long-distance migratory species, and this means that it is vulnerable across its migratory route. The scientific evidence is clear. This species has experienced a 70% population decline over the past 3 generations, which would be consistent with the listing of the species as endangered under the IUCN, which fully justifies its inclusion in Appendix 1. The main threats identified are the lack and degradation of habitat, climate change, hunting in some countries, as well as human disturbance. These are all transboundary issues and affect resting, wintering, and breeding areas. Within this context, we wish to see coordinated action to protect this species, and we believe that its inclusion in Appendix 1 will strengthen international coordination, consolidate existing initiatives, and ensure greater viability of the population across its range. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chile. The European Union, you have the floor.
Of Brazil and Chile for submitting this proposal and support the inclusion of the Hudsonian whimbrel in Appendix 1 of the Convention. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank the European Union. Mauritania. Thank you very much, Chair. Mauritania is a wintering and stopover site for the Hudsonian whimbrel, and we welcome the proposal of Brazil and Chile, and we fully support it. Thank you, Mauritania. Panama, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Panama supports the proposal to include Hudsonian whimbrel in Appendix 1 of the Convention. Thank you. Thank you very much, Panama. Benin. Thank you, Chair. Benin strongly supports this proposal submitted by Brazil and Chile for the inclusion of this species in Appendix 1 of the Convention, given its national status and the threats to its habitat. Thank you. Thank you very much, Benin. Senegal. Thank you very much, Chair. Senegal also wishes to support this proposal for the inclusion of Hudsonian whimbrel in Appendix 1 of the CMS. Thank you very much, Senegal. The Dominican Republic. Thank you, Chair. The Dominican Republic also expresses support for the inclusion of this species in Appendix 1. Thank you. Thank you very much to the Dominican Republic. That was the last speaker on my list. And I see that overall there is support in the room for this proposal. I therefore consider that the Committee of the Whole agrees to submit this proposal as it stands for final adoption by the COP plenary. I see no objections. It is so decided, and I invite you to move on to the next item on our agenda, item 30.2.8, proposal for the inclusion of the Hudsonian godwit on Appendix 1 of the Convention, and I invite the proponents, Brazil and Chile, to introduce this document.
Le Chili, à vous la parole.
Chile, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Chile is honored to present, along with Brazil and Peru, the proposal to include the Limosa emastica Hudsonian godwit on Appendix 1. Chile has critical wintering sites for the Pacific and Americas route. in particular the wetlands in Chiloé, where the animal can complete its life cycle. This has been a difficult time in recent years. There are multiple threats, including the loss and degradation of habitat, human disturbance, hunting, and climate change effects. The inclusion of Limosa emastica on Appendix 1 would strengthen an international response, which will be more coordinated and consistent, ensuring that it is protected along its whole migratory route and strengthening cooperation amongst range states. We hope that this milestone will allow us to have a collaborative agenda with various countries that are part of the migratory route. For Chile, this proposal reflects the spirit of CMS to act jointly in the face of shared challenges and to protect species whose conservation depends on connectivity amongst ecosystems and countries. We would like to highlight that Chile has a clear commitment to bird preservation and conservation with public policy instruments such as hunting law, the National Strategy for Bird Conservation, and the Action Plan for Shorebird Protection. We would also like to highlight the technical work we have carried out jointly with Manomet Conservation Science, which has helped us to bring about the best scientific information and evidence for our proposals. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chile. I now give the floor. The floor is open. Peru, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. Peru supports this proposal. Thank you very much, Peru, the European Union.
To thank the governments of Chile and Brazil for submitting this proposal and support the inclusion of the godwit in Appendix 1 of the Convention. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, l'Union.
Thank you very much, European Union. New Zealand.
On Appendix 1 of the Convention. New Zealand is actually a range state for the species as well. Although the vast majority make their way down to South America, a tiny handful join their cousins, the eastern bar-tailed godwit, on the flight from Alaska down to New Zealand in the world's longest non-stop migration. And they're a very sought-after bird when they turn up in our country because they're so rare, but we get records of them every year. So we're very happy to protect them when they turn up in our patch. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, New Zealand. Panama, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Panama supports this proposal. Thank you. Thank you very much, Panama. Uruguay. Thank you, Chair. Uruguay supports this proposal for inclusion. Our country has regular populations of Limosa emastica, and we consider that it's a priority species for our country, and we thank the proponents and support the proposal. Thank you very much, Uruguay. Brazil.
Of this proposal, of course, we supported this proposition, which is fully in line with Brazilian policy of conservation of migratory birds. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, le Brésil.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Ecuador. Thank you, Chair. Ecuador supports this proposal. Thank you, Ecuador. Dominican Republic. Thank you, Chair. The Dominican Republic is including this species on our national red list, and we strongly support the proposal. Thank you. Thank you, Dominican Republic. I now call on the last speaker on my list, Saudi Arabia.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. That was the last speaker on my list. I see that the global tendency is to support this proposal for inclusion on Appendix 1, and I suggest that we recommend sending this direct to the COP for final adoption. I see no objections. It is so decided, and we now move to the next item on our agenda, item 30.2.9, which is on the proposal for inclusion of the lesser yellowlegs, and I call on Uruguay to present the document. You have the floor, Uruguay.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, distinguished delegates. In relation to agenda item 30.2.9, Uruguay would like to present the proposal for the inclusion of the lesser yellowlegs, Dringa flavipes, on Appendix 1 of the Convention. This document was prepared and proposed by the government of Uruguay. Loss of habitat due to progress of agriculture, climate change, pollution, hunting in particular during the migration and non-breeding stages. The importance of farming and agriculture in the areas for these species, as well as other migratory fauna, means that we should call on agricultural ministries and farming representatives where they are managing the work, and they can bring about a change significantly and assist with the conservation of this species and others. The listing on Appendix 1 is key to promoting joint efforts for the species conservation and its habitat, mitigating the main threats and reversing the accelerated reduction of this migratory species. The Sessional Committee welcomed the proposal, which has a solid information base, and it recommends approval. An amendment was made to the proposal which will benefit existing initiatives and to promote concerted actions on the conservation of the Dringa flavipes, such as the Atlantic Flyways Shorebirds Initiative, the Mid-Americas Shorebirds Initiative, and Road to Recovery. We encourage members to support this initiative so that we can progress in the protection of this important and very relevant species. Thank you. Thank you very much, Uruguay. The floor is open. I now give the floor to Peru. Peru, you have the floor. This species is covered by our national shorebirds plan, and we support this inclusion. Thank you very much, Peru. Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Argentina supports the proposal. Thank you, Argentina. Bolivia, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Bolivia supports this proposal. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bolivia. Panama. Thank you, Chair. Panama also supports this proposal. Thank you, Panama. European Union.
Republic of Uruguay for submitting this proposal and support the inclusion of the lesser yellowlegs in Appendix 1 of the Convention. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, European Union. Ecuador. Thank you, Chair. Ecuador also supports this proposal. Thank you, Ecuador. Dominican Republic. Thank you, Chair. The Dominican Republic also supports this proposal. Thank you, Dominican Republic. Costa Rica. Thank you, Chair. Costa Rica, as a range state of this species, also supports the proposal. Thank you very much, Costa Rica. The last speaker is Brazil.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Brazil. So that was the last speaker on my list. I see that we have consensus to recommend the proposal for the listing of this species to the COP plenary. I see no objections. It is so decided, and I hope we will now continue along the same line with our upcoming agenda items. So now we will move to item 30.2.10, which is the proposal for the snowy owl. And I call on Norway to present the document. You have the floor.
Colleagues, Norway is pleased to introduce our proposal to add the snowy owl, Bubo scandiacus, to Appendix 2 of the CMS. The snowy owl is one of the Arctic's most iconic species, strongly associated with open tundra landscapes across the circumpolar region. Despite its wide range, the species faces increasing pressure from climate change, habitat alteration, and declining prey availability. Particularly the lemming cycles on which it depends. In recent decades, multiple monitoring programs across the Arctic have documented significant fluctuations and in some regions declines in snowy owl breeding success distribution and overall population stability. The snowy owl is also a highly migratory species, regularly moving between Arctic breeding grounds and temperate wintering areas across Eurasia and North America. These movements vary in scale from year to year depending on environmental conditions. This high degree of mobility means the species crosses numerous national jurisdictions, making international cooperation essential for its conservation. Norway believes that listing the snowy owl is both timely and appropriate. Appendix 2 is designed for species that have an unfavorable conservation status and would benefit from international agreements and coordinated action. The snowy owl meets these criteria. Its conservation challenges are transboundary by nature, and no single country can address them in isolation. Importantly, this proposal aligns with broader CMS priorities for Arctic species and supports ongoing scientific collaborations already underway among Arctic states. It is also recognized as a vital indicator of ecosystem health by the Arctic Council. Norway has consulted with several range states and scientific experts, and we are encouraged by the broad recognition that the snowy owl would indeed benefit from enhanced international cooperation under CMS. In conclusion, Norway respectfully invites parties to support the inclusion of the snowy owl in CMS Appendix 2. We believe this listing will provide a strong framework for collaborative action and contribute meaningfully to safeguarding this remarkable species for future generations. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, la Norvège.
Thank you very much, Norway. The floor is open, and I give the floor to Saudi Arabia.
For submitting this proposal, and Saudi Arabia really strongly support the proposal for the inclusion of the snow owl on Appendix 2 of the convention. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Saudi Arabia. Liberia, you have the floor.
Inclusion of the snow owl on Appendix 2 of the convention. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Liberia. Monaco, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. The Principality thanks Norway for this listing proposal and support the proposal. Thank you very much, Monaco. European Union. Thank you, Chair.
the inclusion of the snowy oil in Appendix 2 of the Convention.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, European Union. Panama. Thank you, Chair. Panama also supports this proposal. Thank you, Panama. I am now coming to the last speaker on my list, Brazil.
Donc, c'était la dernière intervention sur la liste.
That was the last speaker on my list. Thank you very much, Brazil. I see that the committee recommends the proposal to include this species on the Appendix 2 of the Convention, and it shall be sent to the COP for final adoption. I see no objections. It is so decided, and now I call on the committee to move to the next item, 30.2.11, which is the proposal for the inclusion of the Iberia seed eater on Appendix 2 of the Convention, and I invite Brazil to introduce the relevant document. You have the floor.
Presented by Brazil and Argentina to include the Iberia seed eater in Appendix 2. This species is relatively recently described. It occurs in Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Brazil, where there are only occasional records restricted to the states of Mato Grosso do Sul. Available data suggests that the species spends the winter months non-breeding period in Brazil and breeds in Argentina and Paraguay. The species is threatened by habitat loss and degradation, particularly as a result of unsustainable agricultural practices, further exacerbated by wildfires. Iberia seed eater is classified as near threatened species on the IUCN Global Red List. Some of its congeneric species with which it shares its habitats are included in the Memorandum of Understanding on the Conservation of Southern South American migratory grassland birds and their habitats. The inclusion of the species in Appendix 2 would enhance its visibility and strengthen international cooperation to improve scientific knowledge about the species, achieve a better understanding of its population dynamics and threats, and consequently, its conservation status. Additionally, symbolically, the inclusion of a species named after Ibirana in the Pantanal during a COP held in the Brazilian Pantanal may help draw attention to and promote the conservation not only the species but also of all its habitats associated with its important wetlands region of South America. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Brazil. The floor is open. Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Argentina, as a co-proponent, supports the proposal. Thank you, Argentina. Paraguay. Thank you, Chair. Paraguay supports the proposal. It's a species which is widely present in our territory, so we agree with its inclusion. Thank you, Paraguay. European Union.
Submitting this joint proposal and support the inclusion of the Iberia seed eater in Appendix 2 of the Convention.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, European Union. Panama, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Panama also supports this proposal. Thank you, Panama. Uruguay, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Uruguay supports this proposal to improve the conservation of this significant species. Thank you, Uruguay. Bolivia. Thank you, Chair. Bolivia supports this proposal. Thank you. Thank you, Bolivia. I now go to my last speaker. I give the floor to Peru. Peru supports the proposal. Thank you. Thank you very much, Peru. That was the last speaker on my list. So, distinguished delegates and participants, the committee clearly recommends this proposal to the COP for adoption. I do not see any objections. It is so decided, and I now invite you to move to the next item, 30.2.12, on the proposal for the inclusion of the pelagic thresher, the big eye thresher, and the common thresher on Appendix 1 of the Convention, and I invite Panama to present the relevant document. You have the floor, Panama. Thank you very much, Chair. For Panama, it's an honor to present this proposal to include the pelagic thresher, the big eye thresher, Alopias supercilius, and the common thresher, Alopias vulpinus. These three migratory species cross EEZs and areas outside of jurisdiction in tropical waters because of their long migratory patterns. Only international cooperation can efficiently protect them. Thresher sharks suffer major population declines in most of their area. It is classified as endangered, and they are also seen as vulnerable and endangered. And they are endangered in all areas. The three species have biological characteristics that they share that make them vulnerable to overexploitation: slow growth, late maturity, and low reproductivity rates. They only produce 2 to 4 births a year, and this limits their recovery in the face of fisheries. The main threat to the fisheries is the unsustainable mortality due to fisheries. This is due to in bycatch and direct catch when they are caught in non-target fisheries. This happens mainly in the long-line pelagic fisheries, and it affects the species severely. Despite existing measures in some regional fisheries management organizations and listing in Appendix 2 of CMS and CITES listing, the fisheries threat, both direct and indirect, continues to be a major threat. The scientific council of the CMS reviewed the proposal and saw the high vulnerability and the lack of data, including often misidentification. The uncertainty, however, should not block action, and we should apply a precautionary approach. The threats that they face and the national measures are not sufficient to ensure their recovery. So inclusion in Appendix 1 would be a major step which is necessary to ensure that parties can strictly protect these species by prohibiting their targeted fishing and also tackling all threats throughout their range. That is why we call on all parties to support this and to adopt decisive measures to support these highly vulnerable migratory sharks. Not only will it help these species, but it will show a joint commitment to maintain biodiversity. Thank you. Thank you very much, Panama. The floor is open. Monaco, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Monaco strongly supports this proposal. Thank you very much, Monaco, New Zealand.
Supports making decisions based on the best available scientific information in accordance with the guidelines agreed by this convention. Simply put, we do not consider that the proposed listing of common and big-eye thresher sharks is consistent with the guidelines for assessment of appendix listing proposals, which is Resolution 13.7. Both big-eye and common thresher are considered vulnerable by the IUCN, with the date of the most recent assessments being 2019. Whilst the guidelines do provide for Appendix 1 listing of vulnerable species, this is only when there is substantive information subsequent to the latest IUCN assessment that provides evidence of a deteriorating conservation status. We do not consider that this criteria has been met, either within the proposal or any of the additional information provided, which we thank the proponent for submitting. Whilst these species are subject to fishing pressure, do have biological traits that make them susceptible to overexploitation and show ongoing population declines in some, but by no means all areas for which data exists, none of this information is new. This was well known at the time of the most recent IUCN assessments. We also note that the Advisory Committee for the Sharks MOU also concluded that big-eye and common thresher sharks do not meet the criteria for Appendix 1 listing. We do support the proposal to list pelagic thresher sharks, as this species is critically endangered and thus clearly meets the guidelines. Appendix listing is a cornerstone of the CMS. To uphold the credibility of the Convention, it is vital that each listing proposal is carefully and objectively reviewed against the guidelines that we together have all agreed. Not doing so risks undermining CMS listing, providing a disincentive for large fishing nations to join either CMS or the MOU sharks, and diverting much needed attention away from species which face a clear risk of extinction. New Zealand places great importance of managing the impact of fishing upon sharks and has implemented extensive measures to ensure their conservation. However, we ultimately consider the CMS appendices as a core prioritisation tool for ensuring that available resources are directed towards those species that need it most. Whilst the status of common and big-eye threshers is of concern in some areas, we do not consider that the best available science demonstrates these species are in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant portion of their range. Therefore, we do not support affording the species the highest level of protection available under the Convention. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, New Zealand. So, in the light of that intervention, I suggest that the committee look at this species by species. There are 3 species included here, and with your indulgence, to manage time well, I will request the state to ask for states that are against listing. So I'll start with the first, the pelagic thresher. Who is against the listing of this species on Appendix 1 of the Convention? The Dominican Republic. Thank you, Chair. My apologies. We had called for the microphone so we could support the proposal. So please, I would like to have state parties who are against listing the first species. I would ask them to request the floor.
Peru. Chair, this relates to the 3 species. Peru would be against the inclusion thereof. We are grateful for the presentation of the document, which proposes the inclusion of pelagic thresher, big-eye thresher, and common thresher on Appendix 1 of the Convention. We recognise the importance of addressing the conservation of this species within international commitments, which Peru has respected consistently. Given the assessment of the biological, socio-economic and fisheries-related data, we cannot support the inclusion of these species on Appendix 1 in its current state. We have a progressive fisheries-based approach based on criteria which focuses on sustainable and responsible use of bycatch. We believe that inclusion on Appendix 1 may lead to overreach and not bring about may bring about negative impacts for communities who depend on these fish. We do not believe that the inclusion on Appendix 1 is appropriate here, although it may improve their conservation, particularly in the case of Peru. Appendix 1 should apply only to species which are critically endangered, whereas we do not see that situation in Peru. These fisheries are a source of livelihoods for local communities, and banning fisheries under Appendix 1 would not limit the fishing of these species. Instead, it would encourage discard and illegal fisheries, which would make these species even more vulnerable. The Appendix 2 would perhaps be a more appropriate framework for the inclusion of these species, as well as ensuring the well-being of those who depend on them. We believe that we should look at this proposal in consistence with the other applicable frameworks, such as the CITES Convention, in order to prevent contradictory indications. We believe that a proposal of this scope would require more anticipated discussions among range states of the species to ensure fully informed participation of relevant stakeholders. Peru reiterates its commitment to preserve species of sharks, as well as sustainable and responsible use of these species under international frameworks. We believe that science-based approaches are key to not jeopardizing the survival of these species and the livelihoods of communities. This is why we do not support the inclusion of these species on Appendix 1. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Peru, Panama, you have the floor.
C'est bon maintenant.
You should have the floor now. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We would like to request a motion here because our proposal was for the 3 species. We do not want to see a division of these species for a reason which is that it is difficult to identify these species. In many cases, they are identified together. This is why we would like to have this taken as an entire package with the 3 species included and not divided into the 3 different species. We would consider it as a whole. Thank you, Panama. Please bear with us for just a few moments. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, I see that the proponent of this proposal wishes to have a discussion on all 3 species as a whole. So this depends on the Committee of the Whole's opinion. Does the committee agree to discuss the 3 species as one single package? Brazil.
From Panama to discuss all the 3 proposals at the same time. Thank you.
Merci
Thank you, Brazil. Chile. Thank you, Chair. Chile also opposes the inclusion of all 3 species in Appendix 1, just like Peru. We believe that more can be done under their listing in Appendix 2. We need a more robust enforcement of current measures, and if they were to be transferred to Appendix 1, we would require information from all range states. We are also concerned about this discussion for inclusion on Appendix 1 of CMS, whereas it is still included under Appendix 2 of CITES. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chile. The European Union, you have the floor.
Species, so we are with the proponent here. Thank you.
D'accord, donc.
Very well. I am still waiting for the room to answer my query. Should we address all 3 species in one go, rather than dividing them into individual species? I see no objections to this way forward, so we shall discuss the inclusion of all 3 species in one package. We shall not divide them into individual species. Panama. Thank you, Chair. If we understand correctly, according to what was said by New Zealand, there were amendments to the proposal, we believe. So we should discuss this as initially proposed, which was the inclusion of all 3 species on the Appendix 1 of the Convention. Yes, thank you, Panama, for that clarification. That is what we are currently proposing. That is to say, to consider the proposal for the inclusion of all 3 species. So may I ask you to make statements on all 3 species inclusion on Appendix 1? Brazil.
Convention, thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Brazil. Benin. Thank you, Chair. Benin is also committed to preserving sharks, and we fully support the inclusion of these species on Appendix 1 of the Convention. The United Kingdom.
I would like to congratulate Panama for their leadership to propose the listing of these wide-ranging, vulnerable migratory species experiencing high pressure, low resilience, and ongoing declines. We are strongly supportive of this Appendix 1 listing. Thank you.
Uruguay. Thank you, Chair. Uruguay is in favor of the inclusion of all 3 species on Appendix 1. Thank you. The Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic is in favor of the proposal submitted by Panama. This proposal should strengthen the protection status afforded to all thresher shark species which cross through Dominican Republic waters. as reflected in our national regulation, which bans the catch and trade of all species on for an undetermined amount of time. Thank you to the Dominican Republic. Paraguay. Thank you, Chair. Paraguay supports Panama's proposal. Thank you, Paraguay. Ghana.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Ghana. WWF.
Thank you, Chair. WWF would like to express strong support for the proposal to list the 3 thresher shark species, genus Alopius, on CMS Appendix 1. Thresher sharks are facing severe and accelerating population declines in multiple regions. A further challenge is the persistent difficulty in species-level identification. Many fisheries record Alopius catches only at genus level due to overlapping morphological features and limited capacity for onboard identification. This results in significant underreporting and uncertainty in global catch and trade data, as also discussed in the Aquatic Working Group. For these reasons, Appendix 1 listing is both necessary and proportionate. It provides a clear science-based foundation for parties to prohibit taking, strengthen monitoring, and invest in capacity building for accurate species identification and reporting. It also aligns with CMS mandate to protect migratory species experiencing unfavorable conservation status and requiring concerted international action. Chair, thresher sharks are long-range ocean migrants that cross national jurisdictions and depend on international cooperation for their survival. Listing all 3 species on Appendix 1 will help ensure that these iconic species are no longer overlooked, that data gaps are addressed, and that populations have a chance to recover. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, WWF. Senegal, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Given that scientific data available indicate extremely concerning declines in the big-eye thresher, common thresher, and pelagic thresher globally, we support Panama's proposal. Thank you, Senegal.
Je reviens.
Now, coming back to New Zealand. Earlier, you supported the inclusion of 1 species, but you were against the inclusion of 2 others. What are your views on the proposal as a whole?
Thank you, Chair. As previously stated, New Zealand has reservations with this proposal. However, given the support in the room and our long-standing support for improved shark conservation and management, New Zealand will not stand in the way of agreement on this issue. That being said, we wish to note for the record our concern on the limited evidence to demonstrate that big eye and common thresher shark meet the appendix listing criteria and the worrying precedent that this would set. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, New Zealand. I understand that you can agree to the proposal then. Very well, thank you very much. Now, coming back to Peru. Having listened to the room, what are your views? Peru reiterates its objection to this proposal. Thank you, Peru. Chile. Chile reiterates its objection to the proposal as well. Thank you, Chile. Please bear with us just a few moments to consult. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, in light of the discussions, I see there is no overall consensus in the room. I therefore wish to give the floor to the Secretariat to share with us the way forward in this type of scenario.
According to the rules of procedures, if parties have exhausted every effort to reach agreement by consensus, Article 11.4 of the Convention shall apply to the voting and the proposed amendment of the appendices shall be adopted by 2/3 majority of parties present and voting. The vote can be requested either by a party or by the chair of the meeting. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank the Secretariat. Panama. I see Panama is requesting the floor. Thank you, Chair. We wish to submit a motion for a roll call vote. Thank you very much, Panama. I would prefer to avoid moving towards a vote, given that our convention is broadly consensus-based. However, I see that there does not seem to be a consensus emerging in the room. Therefore, may I ask Chile, Peru, and Panama to consult with one another? Is there any possibility that these consultations may yield results? If that is not the case, then we will have to resort to a vote. I see delegates indicating that there seems to be an issue with the translation. Can you hear the translation? Very well. Were you able to hear my proposal? I shall repeat my comments. I would prefer to avoid moving to a vote, given that our convention is essentially a consensus-based one. However, there does not seem to be a consensus emerging in the room. We have one last opportunity to ask the relevant parties, Peru, Chile, and Panama, to hold consultations and to consider whether they may be able to reach consensus on this. And if not, then our last resort will be the vote. Could Peru, Chile, and Panama agree to hold consultations or not? Chile. Chair, could you please bear with us just a few moments so that we can consult with one another? Yes. Peru? We reiterate our objection to this proposal. Panama? Chair, thank you. Panama is not ready to negotiate this proposal. We wish it to be considered as it has been submitted, and the best option in our view is to submit it to a vote. Thank you, Panama. Please, just bear with us a few moments. Distinguished delegates, dear participants, we have considered this item in two phases. One which enabled us to establish that there is not overall consensus. The second phase gave parties the opportunity to engage in consultations. Peru has objected to this proposal, and Panama has also reiterated its position. Therefore, the remaining option is the third option, which is a vote, as proposed by Panama. As such, I suggest that we move to the vote. Does the committee agree to this? There are no objections. I invite the Secretariat to please provide further explanations on the modalities and the way forward for the vote. Please go ahead.
Before Article 11.4 of the Convention shall apply to the voting, and proposed amendments to the appendices shall be adopted by a two-thirds majority of parties present and voting. I understand the method of voting for this vote is going to be a roll call, and I'm going to proceed explaining which countries will have the right to vote and how we are going to proceed with the roll call. So the Secretariat would like to remind parties of the requirements to be eligible to vote. The representative of a party must hold valid credentials in accordance with the rules of procedures and the assessment and report of the Credentials Committee, as per Rule 3. Without valid credentials, the representative of a party does not have the right to vote. As per the latest report of the Credentials Committee, 60 parties have valid credentials at this meeting. Representatives of parties that are 3 or more years in arrears in the payment of their assessed contributions on the date of the opening session of the meeting shall not be eligible to vote. According to the list of assessed contributions, on the 23rd of March of this year, there are 3 parties in arrears that have presented valid credentials. Therefore, the number of parties with the right to vote is 57. The Chair will invite the European Union to indicate if it intends to exercise a right to vote with a number of votes equals to the number of its member states that are parties, as per Rule 21. In the event that the European Union indicates it will vote as a bloc, it will add 26 votes. That's not relevant for a roll call, sorry. So there will be 27 votes coming from the European Union. Since this will be a roll call, if the Chair allows, when he announced the commencement of the vote, that cannot be interrupted unless a point of order on the voting is expressed, I will proceed with calling the delegations starting from alphabetical order. Only those parties that do have the right to vote will be called, and I will wait for the Chair to request the European Union on the intention of the vote first.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank the Secretariat. Let me begin by what you mentioned last. I shall give the floor to the European Union to indicate how they wish to proceed. Would it be one single vote for all 27 states, or would it be 27 votes? You have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to confirm that we will vote as a block, so 27 votes. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you to the European Union.
Accordez-nous un instant.
Please bear with us a few moments.
J'invite le...
I give the floor to the Secretariat so that we can start on the voting procedures.
Have a right to vote. I will skip member states of the European Union, and I will only ask European Union for the 27 votes. Just for clarity, those in favor of adopting the proposal of the listing of the three alopias, please say yes. Those against adopting the proposal, please say no. And those abstain, please just say abstains. For clarity, abstains are not counting towards the majority of the votes, so it will only be according to the rules. Yes and no says that will be counted to determine the majority of 2/3. So for this proposal to pass, we will need 2/3 of the yes, so the affirmative votes has to be 2/3 of the room. The Secretariat will take notes, and then we will support the chair in convening the results. Thank you. So, super atenta, Okay. I will start with the first country with the right to vote, starting with A, Argentina.
I pressed. Sí.
Yes. Argentina abstains from voting, says Argentina.
Armenia. Australia.
Yes.
Bangladesh. Brazil.
Yes.
Burkina Faso.
Yes.
Chile.
Chile se abstiene.
Chile abstains.
Gracias. Costa Rica.
Thank you. Costa Rica abstains.
Yes.
Eswatini.
Yes.
Ethiopia.
Yes.
European Union.
Yes.
Ghana.
Yes.
India.
Abstains.
Liberia.
Yes.
Thank you, Liberia. Mauritania. I don't see.
Yes.
Monaco.
Yes.
Mongolia. They are not in the room. Thank you. Montenegro.
Yes.
Morocco. They're not in the room. New Zealand.
Abstain.
North Macedonia. Oh? Okay, they are not here. Thank you. I don't see us. If you help me, thank you. Panama.
Yes.
Paraguay.
Sí.
Yes. No.
Yes.
Samoa.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Somalia. Somalia.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, yeah. Okay, thank you. Sorry, it seems I skipped Norway. My apologies. Please, Norway, go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. This is all very exciting. We vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. Somalia. South Africa.
Abstain.
Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Uganda.
Yes.
United Kingdom.
Yes.
Uruguay.
Yes.
We will now count the votes, but I think we know we have one no. I'll just make the count for abstains and yeses. Just give us a second. Thank you.
Distingués délégués, chers participants,
Distinguished delegates and participants, I am now going to give the floor to the Secretariat to announce the results of the vote. You have the floor. Ms. Maria.
Abstained. 49 yeses, 1 no. The majority of 2/3 was set at 33.3 votes. So the support of the 2/3 have been achieved. Thank you.
merci beaucoup le secrétaire.
I thank the Secretariat. So we have just heard the results of the vote. The committee supports the proposal to list the thresher shark species on Appendix 1 of the Convention, so it shall be submitted to the COP for final adoption. So, distinguished delegates, I now invite you to move on to the next item of our agenda, which is 30.2.13 on the proposal to list the Patagonian narrow-nosed smoothhound on Appendix 2, and I call on Brazil to introduce the relevant document. You have the floor, Brazil.
To include the Patagonian narrow-nosed smoothhound in the Appendix 2 of the CMS. This species is in a critical conservation status. This small shark is endemic to the Southwest Atlantic, ranging from southeastern Brazil to southeastern Argentina, and undertakes seasonal transboundary migrations between breeding areas in Argentina and Uruguay, and feeding grounds in Brazil. Population declines are estimated to exceed 80% over the last 3 generations, driven by overexploitation in targeted fisheries and incidental catch, mostly by incidental catch, as well as degradation of coastal habitats. Currently, the species is classified as critically endangered by the IUCN. Mistelo Smith constitutes a single population with high genetic connectivity and no significant barriers to dispersal. This feature underscores the need for coordinated regional actions for stock management and recovery as fishing pressure in one country directly affects reproductive success in others. The proposal highlights that the inclusion in Appendix 2 of CMS would establish a cooperation mechanism to promote joint measuring on monitoring, bycatch mitigation, protection of critical habitats, and the exchange of scientific information. At present, Brazil prohibits capture and commercialization of the species, while other countries maintain catch quota and integrate fishery monitoring programs. However, international trade in meat and fins remains a significant threat with ongoing exports. We note that at Brazil initiatives, this species was included in Appendix 2 of CITES at COP20, held in November 2025, with implementation of this decision scheduled to begin in June 2027. Finally, we received some pertinent information from some countries, and we will submit them through an information document and ask to have a reference to that document reflected in the meeting records of this COP. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup le Brésil.
Thank you, Brazil. The floor is open. Uruguay, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Uruguay, as a range state of this species, thanks Brazil for the proposal, and we are also thankful to Brazil for including our comments in the information document that was mentioned, and we support the proposal to include the species on Appendix 2 so that we can continue coordinating efforts between Uruguay, Argentina and Brazil for the conservation of the species. Thank you. Thank you. Uruguay. Senegal, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. We would like to express our support for Brazil's proposal to include the Patagonian narrow-nosed smoothhound on Appendix 2. It is in danger throughout the world, and due to bycatch in fisheries working in its range areas, and this mainly covers Brazil, Uruguay and Argentina, and it's essential that we have regional cooperation so that we can have a sustainable management of these species. Thank you. Thank you, Senegal. Panama, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Panama firmly supports the proposal to include the smoothhound on Appendix 2 of the Convention. Thank you, Panama. Do we have any further requests from state parties? I give the floor to Balia, Jubarte, or Humanize. Thank you, Chair. I wanted to start by requesting the generosity of allowing small Brazilian organizations and of the Global South be given an opportunity to speak. This was not the case on the discussions on the thresholds, which we did not have an opportunity to do. We, as the Brazilian Institute for Ballena Jorobata, Humpback Males, we support, and also the Divers for Sharks proposal in the Bahia of Isla Grande area. We fully support this proposal from Brazil, which fully merits inclusion on Appendix 2. Thank you. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Wildlife Conservation Society or Wetlands. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of WCS and a variety of other organizations, including and Unido Será from Bergen and Divers for Sharks. And we want to express our support for the inclusion of the Patagonian narrow-nosed smoothhound on Appendix 2. This small endemic shark is the first species landed in Argentina and has been covered by artisanal fisheries throughout its range area, and it has seen a significant diminution and is seen as critically endangered, and it is overexploited. Its migratory nature makes it very vulnerable to multiple fisheries and leads to population declines throughout its area. They migrate to the north, to Uruguayan waters, and to the south of Brazil during the coldest months. This is linked for the search for warmer waters, since cold and Atlantic waters progress north. And the species then returns to the south, to coastal zones and the internal continental shelf of Uruguay in the summer. And the inclusion in Appendix 2 aims to encourage cross-border cooperation between the three main range states. And this collaboration would be focused on avoiding bycatch and targeted fishing to ensure that we have the joint monitoring and exchange of data. Given its migratory nature and its critical conservation status, it meets the criteria for inclusion on Appendix 2. We call on all member states to support the proposal made by Brazil and to start a new cycle of conservation for the species throughout the region. Thank you. Thank you very much. I see no further request for the floor. May I consider that the committee recommends the submission of this proposal directly to the COP for final adoption? I see no objections. It is so decided. This proposal for listing will be sent to the COP for final adoption. Now, we still have a few moments, and I suggest we start discussion on 30.2.14 on the proposal for the scalloped hammerhead shark on Appendix 1. And I invite Ecuador to present the document. You have the floor, Ecuador. Thank you very much, Chair. The government of Ecuador is honored to present the proposal to list the scalloped hammerhead shark, Sphyrna luini, on Appendix 1 of this convention. The scientific evidence that sustains this document, that supports this document, is alarming. This species has suffered a global reduction of more than 80% over the last 3 generations, which has led it to be critically endangered by IUCN. This dramatic diminution is driven principally by overfishing and both direct fishing and bycatch. And this is because of international demand for its fins and meat. We're talking about a highly migratory species. The females produce large amounts of. They are covering thousands of kilometers across breeding zones in Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico. Whilst we value the progress made under the CITES Convention and the MOU on CMS sharks, the reality is that the populations continue to decline almost throughout the world. The regulatory mechanisms that exist are insufficient in the face of the size of the threats and include illegal fishing, IUU, the impact of climate change and habitat degradation. Its inclusion in Appendix 1 does not bring any negative risks. On the contrary, it is an urgent measure which is strictly necessary to avoid its irreversible collapse. This decision will allow us to strengthen in regional cooperation and align the international commitments on national actions to ensure that we protect their migratory corridors. We have a real urgency before us, and it is our responsibility. We call on parties to support this proposal. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ecuador. Distinguished delegates and participants, the floor is open.
Le Pérou.
Peru, you have the floor. Chair, distinguished delegates, Peru welcomes the presentation of document 30.2.14, which is the proposal for the inclusion of scalloped hammerhead sharks, Sphyrna luini, on Appendix 1 of the convention. We agree that the status of this species is important and meets the objectives of the convention. The biological, fishing, and socioeconomic data do not allow us to support this at the moment. Recently, we have progressed on scientifically based data looking for sustainable and responsible harvesting, and we think that CMS and CITES should work in a coherent and complementary manner. Transfer to Appendix 1 will impose obligations which could have severe impacts on communities that depend on these fisheries. The proposal itself recognizes that the trends for Sphyrna luini are linked to all hammerhead sharks, and because of the weakness of the taxonomic distinctions. And this is particularly important for Peru, where there is a high probability of confusion of the species on landing. And so where there are different conservation statuses applied to different species, this is not coherent, and it has an impact on artisanal fisheries, because bycatch is mainly attributed to a species that is not suitable for Appendix 1. Appendix 2, when well implemented, is an efficient instrument. The problem is not the current regulations, but its application and implementation, which is not consistent. We recognize the vulnerability of Sviena Luini, but transferring it to Appendix 1 is not an adequate instrument for the reality of fishing in Peru. This does not meet with our very specific regulations where it happens as bycatch. For many artisanal fisheries, this is part of their livelihoods and a source of protein. Banning its capture would not reduce the real mortality of the species, but it would compromise the food security of vulnerable communities and will be a disincentive for the reporting of catch. This proposal must be evaluated in an integrated manner alongside other instruments such as CITES and RFMO regulations locally so that we can cover the subject effectively. We consider that initiatives such as this would benefit from more discussion amongst range states to ensure that we are using a fully informed debate. We reaffirm our commitment to the conservation of Sviena Luini and the fisheries resources through scientific evidence. But we do not want to compromise the livelihoods of the communities that depend on them. So we maintain our call to keep Sviena Luini under Appendix 2 as the best and most efficient method. Thank you. Thank you, says the Chair. Panama.
Thank you very much, Chair. Panama firmly supports the inclusion of Sviena Luini on Appendix 1, and we thank the government of Ecuador for proposing this. As a range state of this species, we have seen the presence of juveniles, and we have seen the increase of fishing of these populations. We know that the migration routes heightens the species vulnerability. This is why it's important to step up international cooperation to ensure the long-term protection of these species. Thank you. Thank you, Panama. Kenya.
Scalloped hammerhead shark in Appendix 1 of the Convention. We recognize that this species is classified as critically endangered globally by the IUCN. For such a highly migratory species that utilizes the Western Indian Ocean as a critically migratory corridor and nursery ground, we believe the transition from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1 is a functional necessity to stop further population collapse. In addition, Kenya being a party to the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission IOTC treaty notes that this proposal is also consistent with the IOTC Resolution 25/08, where all hammerhead sharks in the IOTC area have been given prominent focus for more research and further conservation efforts. By supporting Appendix 1 listing, Kenya reinforces its commitment to regional harmony between fisheries management and international conservation mandates, ensuring that zero retention becomes a legally binding conservation standard across maritime areas. Kenya highlights that successful implementation in the Western Indian Ocean region requires focus on the artisanal fisheries sector. We call for the CMS Party Secretariat to think through possible approaches for the development of alternative livelihoods for coastal communities that are directly impacted by the decisions we make here, and ensure that the prohibitions and bans do not disproportionately impact vulnerable populations while still achieving conservation goals. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Kenya. I invite distinguished delegates to please be brief. Brazil has the floor.
Much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Brazil. Dominican Republic has the floor. Thank you, Chair. We support the proposal submitted by Ecuador, as we have national legislation on marine wildlife. Thank you to the Dominican Republic, the United Kingdom.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia.
Submitted by Ecuador for the inclusion of this species in Appendix 1, and we agree to this proposal. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. CCF or CDF? Distinguished Chair, distinguished delegates, we are speaking on behalf of the Foundation Charles Darwin for the Galapagos as well as regional and international NGOs. We wish to begin by thanking the Government of Brazil, the Secretariat of the CMS for all of the work undertaken and the support provided throughout this conference. We also congratulate the Government of Ecuador for proposing this, and we welcome the proposal of the Scientific Council to include these hammerhead sharks and appendixes of the convention. We know that the hammerhead sharks are great migrators of our oceans with predictable and cyclical migrations across coastal areas, congregation sites and seamounts, and areas beyond national jurisdiction. Despite current regulations under Appendix 2 of CITES and CMS, their populations continue to decline due to overfishing, with an 80% decline over the past 3 generations. The hammerhead sharks are currently categorized as at risk of extinction under the IUCN Red List. Given the best available science and the threats that the hammerhead sharks face, we believe that it's urgent to strengthen international protection in a coordinated manner. This is why we urge parties to support the inclusion of the species on Appendix 1. Thank you. Thank you very much. One last speaker, Senegal. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. The scalloped hammerhead shark is classified as at risk of extinction globally, with an over 80% decline over the past 3 generations in its populations. This is why we support this proposal. Thank you very much, Senegal. Having listened to the statements in the room, there does not seem to be an overall consensus emerging. Therefore, just as we proceeded previously, the first discussion is to seek whether a consensus is emerging. Could I ask Peru whether they would be disposed to consult with the proponent of this proposal? Given what we mentioned about the impact on fisheries communities, we wish to restate our objection to this proposal. Thank you, Peru. I see that it is already past 12:30, so let us decide on the way forward this afternoon on this item. I shall now invite the Secretariat to make a few announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll announce the working groups meeting in this lunchtime. I'll start with the aquatic working group is meeting, the avian working group are meeting, the meeting at 12:45, very soon. The cross-cutting working group is meeting first to discuss resource mobilization, and then it will move on to discuss wildlife health. The budget working group will meet, but only after resource mobilization has ended in the cross-cutting working group. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank the Secretariat, distinguished delegates and participants. Thank you very much for your commitment. This morning's session is adjourned and we shall resume at 1500 hours, 3 p.m.